before we solve this problem, let's take a moment to redraw our diagram and to label what we know. Now, one thing we want to be cognizant of here, PRSW is a rectangle, as is PQTW. And remember, rectangles have angles of 90 degrees, but they also have opposite sides that are equal. In other words, if P to W has a length of x, then Q to T has a length of x as well, because remember, PQTW is a rectangle, and opposite sides of a rectangle are equal. In other words, the ratio of PW to PR, well, that's going to be the ratio of x to 12 plus 15, or 27. And the ratio of PQ to QT is going to be the ratio of 12 to x. Now, according to the problem, these ratios are equal, which means we can set them equal and then cross multiply to solve for x. Let's go ahead and do that work. X times x is x squared, and 27 times 12 we can of course write as 12 times 27. So now that we know that x squared equals 27 times 12, there's really a couple ways we could do the work. One way would of course be to do the multiplication. Let's take a moment to do that here. 12 of course is the same thing as 10 plus 2. So when we do the distribution, 27 times 10 is 270, and 27 times 2 is 54. And when we add those together, we get 324. In other words, we know that x squared equals 324. Now, if you know your list of squares, and remember, everyone who takes the GRE should know their list of squares at minimum through 15, and ideally through 25 if you're looking for an elite quant score. If you know those values, you know that 18 squared is 324. In other words, we therefore know that if x squared is 324, x is 18. That is one way we can determine that quantity B is larger than quantity A. But if you don't know those values, that's not the only way you can solve this question easily. Look, if x squared equals 27 times 12, let's go ahead and take the square root of both sides of the equation. Now remember how this works. When you take the square root of something complicated or large, you always want to break down your value or your values into their prime factors. For example, what is 12? It's 3 times 4. And what's 4? It's 2 times 2. And likewise, what's 27? It's 9 times 3, which of course is 3 times 3 times 3. In other words, when we break down the right side of this equation, we should get 3 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. As a last step, remember, we're going to pull out any pairs we find under the radical sign. Notice how we have a pair of 2's and we have a pair of 3's. And if we pull both pairs outside the radical, well, outside the radical we have 2 times 3, which is 6. And inside the radical we have 3 times 3, which is 9. In other words, this is 6 times the square root of 9. And if the square root of 9 is 3, we're left with 6 times 3, which is 18. That is another way to figure out that x equals 18. And there you have it. If x equals 18, we can clearly see that quantity B is larger than quantity A. And of course, anytime that B is larger than A, that means the correct answer is B.